Okay, I have a quick question. So we're in this universe. Conceivably, there's another universe that is causally disconnected from ours. In fact, there are many theories of physics which posit such universes. And even in principle, not just in practice, but in principle, in some of these theories, we can never know about this other universe and they can never know about us.
Yeah.
I would still say that if those theories are true, that those other universes exist and they exist to us and we exist to them. It's not just, it's not just we exist to them and they exist to us, or we only exist to ourselves or something like that. It's that they exist and we exist.
Yeah.
But according to this, you would say, no, what is real is observer dependent, that our universe is real to us, and that's all we could say?
It's more than that. What I would say is that we have most likely infinite number of universes, each of which has its own causal closure, its own bubble of reality, I like to call it. So for us, our bubble of reality is real. For them, their own bubble of reality is real. But because there's no absolute frame, we cannot privilege our own frame. So we cannot say that only us is the real bubble. And they cannot say that we are not real because only they are the real bubble. Right? So everything exists. So we got now like a reality according to this principle of relativity. If we take it, far enough, it will say that reality composes of all those infinite number of bubbles. All of them are real, right? But it's relative, right? They are real because there is at least two observers. There are at least two observers that can, measure each other, and they have this causal closure, and that's why, it's a real bubble. It's a real universe. Okay, so we
Okay.
So each bubble exists because of the measurements from within. Let's call it. So this is the idea, and one of my papers, my next papers, will show that one of the results of the principle of relativity is that the vacuum cannot be empty. The vacuum cannot be empty. It must contain all those different bubbles of reality. It cannot be the case that only us exist, only this bubble. If it was the case, then it was an absolute property, only us exist, right? So if we take the principle of relativity to be a basic principle of reality, the vacuum, what we cannot measure, actually full with all those different universes, different bubbles that we just cannot measure them. Okay, so this is one of and then I show it. I show it mathematically, and this is what I will show in my third paper, more or less. So
okay,
right now I don't remember what was. How did we reach this question? What did you ask?
Well, I was saying that what disturbs me is that much of this framework, from what I recall from reading your paper, is that a cognitive frame of reference is defined by the dynamics of the system. And then I was wondering, well, at what scale does a single neuron get a cognitive frame? Does my cortical column, or one of them, or my left hemisphere? And if there's no principled way to draw that boundary, then how do we know what is conscious and what's not? To the physicist listening, there's a preferred basis problem. In physics, it seems like there's a cognitive preferred basis problem or frame problem.
This is a very good question. So your question is actually from an absolute point of view. You try to understand the absolute answer here. To get an absolute answer, which scale is the correct scale? But what we saw with the emergence scenario and with the simulation scenario, actually, is that we need to think from a relativistic point of view. And then what matters are the causal relations, as you said before. To exist is to have causal relations. So one neuron exists because it has causal relations with other neurons in the brain and other stuff, right, in the brain. Cognitive system also exists. Now, we need to remember what is a cognitive system. And one neuron most probably is not a cognitive system just because of our definition. Our definition is that a cognitive system is a system that, can get inputs, learn, create representations, do information manipulations, and create outputs out of them. If a neuron can do that, then one neuron can be cognitive system already. If one neuron cannot do it, then it cannot be a cognitive system. Let's suppose that it cannot do it. Let's suppose that we need a bunch of neurons. Now, this group or set of neurons, they together, they have causal power. They react to the world, and the world reacts to them as well. So that's why now they are a new entity. Okay, according to relationalism, this is now a new entity. And that's why for this entity I call a cognitive frame of reference. No consciousness. Notice, no consciousness yet. It's just about a learning system. Okay? But already we know from the example of water, for example, that there is an emergence here of a new entity, even though it's not about consciousness yet. Okay, so we call this entity a cognitive frame of reference. Okay? Now we need to continue because we didn't reach our destination. We didn't reach phenomenal properties at all. But we did some steps towards it already. And let me show you why we did some steps. The last scenario that I described was about the simulation and how we can choose an intrinsic frame of reference inside the simulation, right? In this intrinsic frame, they will, let's say that someone, that there are humans over there, right? And I somehow can communicate with them, and I ask them, what do you see? Again, not about consciousness, okay? I don't want people to be confused here. But let's say, what's inside the simulation? What do we see in this frame of reference? And, the measurements are measurements of everything that we see here in the universe. They have stars, they have gravitational force, electromagnetic force, and so on. But for me, I'm from an external frame of reference. I see a computer that runs a simulation. I just see a code. I don't see stars inside the computer. I don't see gravitation inside the computer, So it seems if I don't know about relativity, if I think everything is absolute, it seems like that there is an explanatory gap here, because from the inside of the simulation, they have stars and gravitation, but from the outside, from the external, I don't see them, and I cannot understand how entire star, with huge mass can be inside my computer. How can I do a reduction here? It doesn't make any sense, right? So there is we created an explanatory gap here, not because of consciousness, just because of this weird situation with the properties inside the simulation and outside the simulation. But it's only a seemingly explanatory gap, because there is an explanation here. There is no gap. The explanation is relativity, the principle of relativity and relationalism. From the outside, I measure the substrate of my computer, and then I measure those electric current that moves in the logical gates. And as part of those states that are moving in my computer, they have some content about the variables of the equations. Okay? So it's a very complex causal structure here. Some of the causality is about the electricity, right? Some of the causality is about the equations, the variables of the equations. But the variable of the equations is just one, let's say, has some causal power, but very small causal power in my frame of reference. It doesn't, those states, those variables doesn't change, for example, the location of the currents inside my computer. It does some work, let's call it, because it changes the equations, the states, but it doesn't do a lot of work. It doesn't change the electricity movement, inside my computer. Okay? So from my frame of reference, this is what I measure. Just a computer runs some algorithms. But from the inside, from the frame of reference of the simulation, the measurements are completely different. Over there, all they can measure are only those variables. So the variables now has much bigger causality, causal power, than what I can measure from the outside. Over there, the causality is exactly what they do in the equations, how they change other variables. And because of that, of those relations, all of a sudden, over there is a manifestation of a space, a manifestation of stars, of gravity. Okay, just because they have much less complex causal structure. All the causality over there is just because of how the variables interact with each other in the equation. That's it. No causal structure of the substrate, of the electricity and all that. And that's why, because it's such a narrow causal structure over there, the properties and entities are so different than what I measure from the outside, and that's why they actually measure stars and electricity and gravity and so on. So now we have an explanation. There is no gap anymore. There is an explanation why we measure such different properties in the intrinsic simulation frame of reference and the extrinsic frame of reference, of where I see the computer. I think it's a very deep point, because we actually created here like an artificial gap, explanatory gap, and but according to relativity and relationalism, we can bridge this gap, right? And if this is understood, then we can take, it means that we did some steps towards understanding how to bridge the gap with consciousness.
The Economist covers math, physics, philosophy, and AI in a manner that shows how different countries perceive developments and how they impact markets. They recently published a piece on China's new neutrino detector. They cover extending life via mitochondrial transplants, creating an entirely new field of medicine. But it's also not just science. They analyze culture, they analyze finance, economics, business, international affairs across every region. I'm particularly liking their new Insider feature. It was just launched this month. It gives me a front row access to The Economist's internal editorial debates, where senior editors argue through the news with world leaders and policymakers in twice weekly long format shows. Basically, an extremely high-quality podcast. Something else you should know about is that if you go to their app, they not only have daily articles, but they also have long-form podcasts with their editors and writers. This is also available online. Whether it's scientific innovation or shifting global politics, The Economist provides comprehensive coverage beyond headlines. As a TOE listener, you get a special discount. Head over to economist.com/TOE to subscribe. That's economist.com/TOE for your discount.